Hello, everybody. Welcome to an emergency edition of Inside the Birds. Jeff Mosher here, Adam Kaplan in the other window. It is Monday and just about 20 minutes before 4 o'clock. Adam, the news came down a little while ago. It's certainly not going to be shocking for anybody who's been listening to the Inside the Birds podcast or any of our platforms in the past week or so. Doug Pederson fired by the Eagles just 3 years after winning the Super Bowl, the only Super Bowl in franchise history. And then, we've got about 10 or 15 minutes to try to recap it all. Without the risk of being repetitive, we put the issues on the table. There was a lot of coaching staff issues and a vision that Jeffrey Lurie wanted to hear from Doug Pederson that made him confident that Doug Pederson should stay and help fix this thing, as Doug said. Clearly, Jeffrey Lurie was not confident in what he heard from Doug Pederson.
Yeah, we can move this forward and have no information. So this is what this thing's all about. I'm not going to even be repetitive. I'll tell you why this happened based on what I know. Some of it is what we know, but some of it is moving this forward. The reason why there was a second meeting or a second discussion is because the first meeting, it didn't go well. But the hope was, and this is why I said on our show that dropped on Monday morning, the Eagles did not want to fire Doug Pederson. They wanted him to have a clear plan for success in staffing. Okay, you and I had known for a while now that the staffing was not going to work under Pederson and his plan. So come with new names, come with better names, come with people who are proven in their roles around the National Football League. I don't think that happened. That's one of the things that I think came out of this meeting, this discussion today, why Jeffrey Lurie put out that statement on Monday. I think that, to me, when you rank the reasons, that's right up there. I'm going to give you another nugget. So I told you privately, Jeff, 2 years ago, I said, I'm hearing that Pederson's not happy with micromanagers. Being micromanaged is not a fair term. Mm-hmm. He just felt like people were pulling at him, and this could be better, and that could be better, and so forth and so on. And by the way, Jeffrey Lurie, the Eagles just announced Jeffrey Lurie is going to speak. I will tell you when that's going to be. Video conference at 4 o'clock. But anyway, fact of the matter is, as I understand it through multiple sources, Lurie privately did not want to fire this guy. That's why I said what I said on our pod. But he was expecting something, and he didn't get it. What's your clear plan, Doug? What did you have that would help put us back to high respectability? Look, this guy was a pretty successful head coach, Jeff, as you well know, and our listeners know. Okay. Yeah. I mean, now I would also tell you, after 2016, he didn't do a very good job in 2016. I would tell, and it's funny how things work out. They wound up winning the Super Bowl in 17. I do believe he would have been on the series hot seat had they not made the playoffs in 17. We know they won the Super Bowl. So, but I know they were not happy with the way that they performed after his first season, and that they felt Pederson underwhelmed and had to get better. Now he made some changes going into the 17 season, finding players, coaching a little bit harder on them. Got more respect from the players, and they bought in, obviously, and that was a magical year. But the end game was coaching staff. No, the vision did not clearly match what the owner wanted, Jeff. Okay, in the end, what's happened over the last 24 hours, as I understand it, they're clearly not on the same page about whether the team should look. But I do know, as I told you privately a couple years ago, I want to get back to that. Mm-hmm. He just felt like they didn't really see the same way on certain issues, even staffing a couple of years ago when he felt that he had to make some changes. Then you fast forward to last year. He did not want to fire Mike Rowe and Carson Walsh. He actually told Mike Rowe, according to a source, hey, this comes from up top. This is not I didn't want to do this. Mm-hmm. So that tells you, like, if you're Doug Pederson, you're a human being. You don't like confrontation. You don't like firing people. This is what happens. It gets to a point where, Jeff, you want your own people who whether they're good enough coaches or not, you want your own people around you because you feel comfortable with them. And that's kind of where I think this thing led over the last 24 hours.
I do remember around this time last year, Adam, that we had this discussion in a couple of podcasts that we did wonder how long Doug Pederson was going to allow people above him to make decisions that are generally made by a head coach. And if Doug went into this meeting and really didn't have anything different other than wanting to be loyal to his guys, I mean, Doug knew what Doug knew what Jeffrey wanted more of. And so if he wasn't giving Jeffrey what he wanted to hear, then I have to assume that Doug was confident in his abilities and maybe he'll have a job. And he just wasn't this time going to let anybody tell him who's going to be his coaches and who's not going to be his coaches, which I find pretty interesting. It basically becomes my ego versus yours, or my will over yours. And it sounds to me like I bet you if I asked Doug Pederson right now, he'd be all right with this decision, because he probably could have told you this was going to be the decision going into this meeting.
Well, he knew, Jeff, as you and I know, he went into last week's meeting or coming out of it that clearly the owner was not happy, but he wanted to give another chance to revise his list. And I remember you telling me late last week that the big thing, and this would be later confirmed by a lot of people, and it was also reported over the weekend, that Press Taylor was the guy in terms of offense that he wanted to promote. And the way I see it, and I wonder if you agree with me here, the way I see it is, whether it's fair or not, you want to promote a guy who is the quarterback's coach, and he got another title in a promotion. You already promoted him last year. The team had a major regression in offense. Okay, the record 4-11-1 was totally unacceptable. No one saw this coming. But if the guy that you had as coaching your quarterbacks and those quarterbacks regressed, how in the world do you think you're going to sell it to the owner? Who in the right mind would accept that?
No, I think you're right. I think in Philadelphia and in many cities, right? When you have issues like this where it's he said versus he said, or a power struggle, if you want to call it, people tend to take sides. People tend to want to think, well, who's right and who's wrong? And my unique perspective on this is that I think they're both wrong. In that I think that, and we've talked about this on the podcast, I don't think it's a great idea for an owner to have to hire and fire coaches or insist upon or have involvement in the hiring and firing coaches. But at the same time, I also think that a good head coach, as you have talked about a lot, coaches his coaches hard. He does not reward underperforming coaches. He makes changes. Doug comes from the Andy Reid tree. Out in Kansas City, Andy Reid had a defense that wasn't getting it done for many, many years and holding them back. So what did he do? He had to make a difficult decision. He had to fire Bob Sutton, and then he wound up hiring Steve Spagnuolo. Now, he was loyal to Coach Sutton for quite a while there before he finally made the move. The point is, I don't see this as a great situation. I see it as a total team letdown. It's a letdown by the owner, it's a letdown by the GM, and a letdown by the head coach. So to move this forward, Adam, as the Eagles now go and search for their third head coach since firing Andy Reid, I see obstacles here. We have a shaky quarterback situation potentially. We have a salary cap situation that's not very good. We have a general manager who this next head coach will inherit. He will not get to choose who the GM is going to be, like a lot of head coaches sometimes are able to do. And then, of course, we talked about this franchise's reliance on analytics. That will have to be something that the new head coach buys into. So there's a lot of criteria here there. So the team has to get started right away, and we'll see if they can find somebody who's good and can adapt to all of these criteria I just laid out.
Yeah, very fair. Look, the next head coach will have to embrace analytics and numbers and the passing game. I was laughing. Someone asked me about Bill Cowher. I'm like, you couldn't ask for an exact opposite of what Jeffrey Lurie will want in a head coach. He loves the winning, and Bill Cowher's a terrific. In fact, he was a former Eagle, believe it or not, in the mid-'80s. But the fact of the matter is, no, they're going to want someone who believes in the passing game. Brian Daboll is a guy like that. Brian Daboll's been through a lot in his career. He's a terrific coach, by the way. Done one of the best all-time jobs of turning around an inaccurate quarterback.
Yeah, offensive coordinator for the Bills, for those.
Yeah, he's the OC of the Bills, right? And they're analytical building, as I understand. They do believe in analytics. Maybe not to the degree the Eagles do, but they definitely believe in it. Sean McDermott, by the way, as you know, was a Joe Banner protege. Started in the salary cap department for the Eagles when he got in there. And so, look, that would be a good one. I would expect the Eagles to talk to him or have interest in talking to him. He's probably the best one of all the names that I've looked at so far. People have asked about Mike Kafka. Good name, smart. The Eagles wanted him last year. They were interested in him as their OC, but what the Chiefs did is they smartly promoted him. This is before, if you recall, the rules have changed now about interviewing guys who are not coordinators. Now you could, even if the guy's got a quarterback's coach, you could actually put a request and they cannot deny it as long as you can prove that it is actually an upgrade and there would be game plan involvement. But my sense is, well, if Eric Bieniemy becomes a head coach, as I reported a year ago, Kafka is going to be the OC. Now, as a head coach, 34 years old, 21 will be his 5th year in coaching. That's moving fast forward. But here are the things that I know from talking to people who know Kafka very well, who have worked with him or know him. Super smart, very involved in their pass game concepts. He's the one, because he's their quarterbacks coach, who coaches the quarterbacks. Know all the concepts, clearly ready to call plays. There's no question about that. But the question now, because the Eagles needed a head coach, do you think he's ready? I knowing the way the Eagles are, and look, they talked to young Andy Reid was 41, but Andy Reid had never even been a coordinator, and that was a heck of a move by them. So who am I to say that Mike Kafka is too young to talk to? And look, Sean McVay. My goodness, Sean McVay was had just turned 31 when he became the Rams head coach. So people keep asking me about it, and that's just the way I look at it. What are you on Kafka? What do you know about?
Well, yeah, I've asked around about Mike Kafka. I know people who know him, of the Chiefs franchise, so that they feel qualified to at least give me an idea. And they echoed your sentiment about him being a really smart guy, passing game kind of whiz there. What I asked for a downside in particular, what would hold him back? And I was told presence. I mean, he's not the most demonstrative of guys. I think, when you talk about leaders of men, has he really had the opportunity? I know he was a quarterback at Northwestern. He was a former quarterback for the Eagles. I just remember him as a reporter. He didn't strike me as that kind of guy who brings everybody together the way some quarterbacks just radiate that. So he was more of a quiet, introverted type. He's a Northwestern guy, so he's smart. But
you never know until you talk to him.
Yeah. I mean, look, you just never know. But I think when Jeffrey Lurie talks about emotional intelligence and the ability, and that was one of Doug's strengths, we have to acknowledge that. The players fought for him. I don't know that Mike Kafka has that same cachet with him as far as being that kind of presence. But again, he's never really been in that position to have to be in it. So we'll have to see. Look, I think people should also look out for the name Lincoln Riley. I know that because Jeffrey didn't work with Chip Kelly, people have thought that maybe they wouldn't go in that direction again. Listen, I've heard his name been mentioned. So I think that is certainly a name that will get some buzz and you will hear attached to the Eagles as they go forward. I want to say one last thing, though, on Doug Pederson, because, what we do as reporters, Adam, is talk to people, get the best and most truthful information we can, and we put it out there. And certainly we've been very accurate on this. I want to say, though, maybe Doug goes somewhere and maybe he brings Press Taylor with him and has some success there. I'm not ruling out the fact that maybe Doug's a little smarter than the average Bear and how he looks right now, and he just needs to go somewhere else and prove it. And if he does, that will certainly not be a good reflection on both Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. But they're moving on now, and there's a lot of pressure on Jeffrey and Howie right now to bring in the right kind of guy, because we've talked about the state of the franchise and some of the difficulties that it's facing, and you don't want this to be a long fix. Certainly Jeffrey Lurie will not. A lot of pressure on those guys. Yeah,
look, this is a guy, and as much as we've criticized Pederson, we also will praise him for turning his career around at 17, where I got to tell you, after 16, it didn't sound very good from what I was hearing from team sources. And then he grew as a coach, obviously won the Super Bowl. But his brilliance, Jeff, I'll give you one thing, which I've told the story once, but it bears repeating. This tells you how good of a coach the guy can be when he's got himself together. They're flying home from when they won the division in 17, and it went towards ACL. Everyone's faces were sullen when they came off the plane. They got back to the building because, there was probably like 5 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever the hell it was. He was really the only super positive person that Nick Foles could handle the job. Mm-hmm. And some of the people looked at him like, are you out of your mind? Like, we just lost our starting quarterback. But he was so steadfast in his positivity and his belief that they could still win. And you need that. And that plays to what you were talking about, the emotional intelligence that Jeffrey Lurie is looking for. Lurie nailed that one, by the way.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I think Lurie gets too big on buzzwords, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But you got to connect with your players. And Chip Kelly could not do that. And the players loved him. I think half of Doug Pederson is exactly what you want in a head coach. 25% is so-so. The other 25% is you thumbs down. What? Coaching your coaches and evaluating better. That will always be his downfall if he doesn't make it.
No doubt about it. It's amazing, but 2017 now seems very, very, very far away in the rear view window. It was supposed to be the new norm. Clearly, it's not. We'll have more. Look, the next Inside the Birds podcast will drop Wednesday, 6 a.m. This has been our first ever, I think, emergency live stream. So I hope everybody's enjoyed it. We're going to keep it short, sweet. And again, 6 a.m. next Wednesday, Inside the Birds. And of course, make sure you're following us at Inside Birds or at Kaplan NFL, at Jeff Mosher NFL for more information as we go forward. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We're all set. And have a great rest of the day.